This 3D topological map outlines the defining power centers of the Islamic Empire in April 680 CE. The political capital sits in Damascus, hundreds of miles from the religious and historical hubs of Medina and Mecca, with Kufa serving as a volatile garrison city. Following the death of Muawiyah, the geopolitical structure of the empire shifted. Violating a prior peace treaty, Muawiyah appointed his son, Yazid I, as his successor. This replaced the established system of communal consultation with forced hereditary succession. This is the architectural scale of Umayyad power in Damascus, seen here. The empire at this time possessed immense wealth, vast military resources, and centralized administrative control over its territories. In Medina, Imam Hussain, the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, was ordered to pledge allegiance to Yazid. Hussein refused. His stance was rooted in a specific refusal to legitimize systemic corruption and political tyranny, regardless of the military cost. Looking at this view of Medina, we see the sanctuary of the Prophet. Recognizing that remaining here would draw Umayyad forces into the city and ignite an armed conflict inside a sacred space, Hussein chose to leave under the cover of darkness. By departing, Hussein removed the Umayyads' ability to settle the matter through a local skirmish. He placed his ideological challenge in the open desert, forcing the empire to publicly deploy the violence required to maintain its authority. Here in Mecca, Hussein gathered his family and a small contingent of supporters. On the 8th of Zul-Hijjah, they initiated a grueling 900-mile, 23-day march eastward toward Iraq. Their intended destination for this journey was the city of Kufa, seen here. Initially, Hussein received roughly 18,000 written pledges of support from Kufan tribal leaders. However, the Umayyad administration deployed a new governor, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, who utilized bribery and public executions to dismantle the political uprising before Hussein could arrive. Hussein was not passively marching to his death. At the Tani milestone, his caravan intercepted a shipment of imperial taxes bound for Damascus. He redistributed the wealth, issuing a physical challenge to Umayyad economic authority. When the caravan reached the outpost of Zubala, Hussein received confirmed intelligence that his envoy to Kufa had been executed and local support had evaporated. He immediately addressed his followers, granting anyone seeking political gain or military victory explicit permission to leave. The tribal opportunists immediately abandoned the camp. The resulting force was a severe anomaly, a distilled core of roughly 70 committed loyalists, alongside their families, moving forward to face the entirety of an expanding empire. At the Sharaf milestone, they were intercepted by a 1,000-man Umayyad vanguard commanded by Hur ibn Yazid. The imperial troops and their horses were dying of thirst. Hussein ordered his camp to share their limited water reserves with the opposing army. By intentionally shedding unreliable allies and demonstrating moral discipline even toward his captors, Hussein ensured his remaining followers were motivated by shared conviction rather than military expectation. The Umayyad vanguard forced the caravan off the main road, diverting them into a topographical expanse known as the Karbala Gap. This is a 20 to 25-mile choke point bordered by water and open arid desert. This view of the Euphrates illustrates the geographic trap. Forced to halt on the 2nd of Muharram, Hussein anchored his small caravan slightly off the banks of the river, exposed to severe heat and dust storms. This top-down blueprint reveals the specific macro layout Hussein designed to offset his numerical disadvantage. He arranged the tents in a tight, overlapping semicircle. The defenders interlocked the tent ropes across the gaps. This created a physical tripping hazard designed to snag and halt enemy infantry attempting to rush the camp's interior. The non-combatants, the women and children, were positioned deep in the center of this formation, maximizing their physical distance from incoming ranged attacks. Immediately behind the tents, the defenders excavated a continuous trench, or kandak, spanning the entire rear perimeter. They filled this trench with dry wood and desert brush. In the event of an attack, igniting this wood would definitively neutralize any attempt by the enemy to flank them from the rear. This specific architecture altered the battlefield geometry. A 30,000-man army could no longer surround the caravan. They were forced to fight on a hyper-narrow, exclusively frontal axis. On the 7th of Muharram, the Umayyad command deployed a strategy of logistical attrition. They positioned 500 cavalry along the riverbank, physically severing the Husseini camp's access to the Euphrates. A total water embargo in a severe desert environment rapidly degrades human physiology. For 3 days, combatants, nursing mothers, and infants endured acute dehydration. The only relief came from a high-risk asymmetrical cavalry sortie led by Abbas ibn Ali. He punched through the Umayyad lines with 50 men to secure a small, temporary supply of water, which was quickly exhausted. By the night of the 9th, Shab-e-Ashura, the Umayyad army was in position to attack. Rather than descending into panic, the Husseini camp entered a period of intense psychological fortification. Hussein gathered his men and issued a final test of loyalty. He explicitly released them from their oaths of allegiance. He then extinguished the camp's lamps, offering them the cover of darkness to slip away unseen. When the sun rose the next morning, not a single defender had deserted. The embargo did not produce a single defection, leaving the Umayyad command without the quick surrender they expected. The statistical disparity on the morning of Ashura was immense. A Husseini force of fewer than 150 individuals stood against an imperial army numbering roughly 30,000. The defenders arranged themselves in a highly disciplined formation to hold the narrow front. Zuhair ibn Quayn commanded the right flank, Habib ibn Muzahir held the left, and Abbas ibn Ali held the center standard. Opposite them, the massive Umayyad deployment filled the horizon. The left wing, right wing, cavalry, and infantry heavily outweighed the defenders in every metric of warfare. Just as the Umayyad charge began, the defenders ignited the rear conduct. A massive wall of fire erupted, securing their backs. The Umayyad strategy relied on a mass frontal assault. They intended to use their sheer weight of numbers to trample the small defensive pocket in a matter of minutes. But the Husseini camp's tight architecture, combined with the blazing trench, funneled the attackers into a severe bottleneck. The initial charge was broken. The defenders systematically dismantled the frontline troops in hand-to-hand combat. Suffering unexpectedly heavy losses, the Umayyad vanguard was forced to retreat and pivot their tactics. Recognizing they could not break the line with infantry, the Umayyad commander, Umar bin Sa'd, ordered his archers back. He relied entirely on staggered, ranged attrition, launching continuous barrages of arrows and stones from a safe distance. A force roughly 0.5% the size of its enemy successfully dictated the terms of engagement, stalling the vast imperial army for the entire first half of the battle. As the battle shifted to one-on-one combat, the diversity of the Husseini defenders became a lethal asset. Respected tribal elders fighting alongside freedmen systematically stepped forward, engaging and eliminating Umayyad challengers until they themselves fell to exhaustion and injury. Once the companions were killed, the Banu Hashim, the Prophet's own family line, deployed. Young men like Ali Akbar and the 13-year-old Qasim entered the field, fighting with immense proficiency before being surrounded and cut down. The killing of the infant Ali Asghar violated established Arab codes of warfare. It signaled that the Umayyad military was no longer bound by traditional ethics, even when facing the Prophet's own family. Eventually, Hussein stood entirely alone against the converging remnants of the Umayyad military. Despite severe blood loss and dehydration, his combat proficiency forced the enemy infantry into retreat. Refusing to approach him in close combat, the Umayyad soldiers overwhelmed him through a barrage of ranged attacks, striking him with arrows and stones until he collapsed. The duration of the stand, involving the systematic killing of a small group of relatives and elders, stripped the Umayyad victory of military prestige. Contemporary accounts recorded the event as a massacre of kin, framing the survivors' plight as a catalyst for widespread dissent. The immediate aftermath, known as Sham-e-Ghariban, escalated the violence. The Umayyad troops looted the dead, trampled Hussein's body with horses, burned the protective tents, and abused the surviving women and children. Amidst the chaos of the burning camp, Sayyeda Zainab, Hussein's sister, assumed critical leadership. She organized the survivors, protected the ailing Imam Sajjad, and prevented the total annihilation of the lineage. The survivors were placed in chains and marched to Kufa and then to Damascus. In the courts of the very men who ordered the massacre, Zainab delivered defiant public speeches. She used the tragedy to expose the regime's brutality directly to its citizens. The geopolitical backlash was rapid. Uprisings like the Tawabin and the movement of Mukhtar al-Thaqafi swept through Iraq. Within years, these forces systematically hunted down the perpetrators of the massacre, dismantling Umayyad power in a region. This image shows the Arba'in pilgrimage today, where tens of millions of people march to Karbala annually. The victors of the battle have no monuments, while the followers of those they killed now number in the hundreds of millions. While the Umayyad military physically destroyed Hussein's force, they failed to contain his message. The strategic defiance at Karbala created a political schism that would undermine Umayyad legitimacy for the remainder of their rule.